Hi everyone, my name is Yuto Watabe. I'm from Penn State. Let me explain my job market paper, Triangulating Multinationals and Trade, in 8 minutes. In short, my paper builds a quantitative framework to evaluate policies on multinationals and trade. We know that multinationals are so important in the economy, so that a lot of commercial policies are about multinational firms. For example, we know Brexit is not only about trade, but it's also about multinationals. Brexit made EU firms difficult to operate in the UK and vice versa. Other examples are from the US. Joe Biden, the current president elect, proposed a surtax on multinationals offshoring. He proposed to raise a tax on US multinationals if they produce abroad and sell their product back to the US. Donald Trump suggested a more extreme policy. He claimed that he has legal authority to prohibit the activities of US multinationals in China. We want to know the impact of these policies, and to do that, we need a data on multinationals' production. Like, where do they locate their production? How much do these affiliates produce in each country? But we know that this is not enough. We need to know where do the output of these affiliates are sold to. Let's think about the case of the Donald Trump's idea on prohibiting US multinationals to operate in China. If these US affiliates in China are selling to countries like Japan and Germany, these countries will be also impacted by the policy. If these affiliates in China are selling things back to the US, the policy ends up backfiring. The thing is, we need a destination of what multinationals produce. I represent this by a triadic figure, which I'm going to call allocation, noted as X. Here, XILM is a production of goods by firm from country I, produced in country L, and sold in country M. In this example I explained, if you know where US affiliates in China sell to, we can figure out the impact of the policy. The challenge is that there is no systematic data available on this. The detailed data on multinationals and their sales destination are only available in certain countries such as Germany, Japan, China, and the US, and these available data are much more aggregated than this XILM. So we don't have an exact data to evaluate the policies and perform counterfactual experiments. How can we study the impact of these policies without exact data in hand? My paper approached this problem by partial identification. We have counterfactual scenario we want to evaluate, and my framework does not tell you exactly what would happen, but tells you the set of possible outcomes like wage and welfare consistent with the data available. There are 3 steps in this approach. Firstly, I use 2 sets of data to triangulate, this is the title of my paper, the allocation X. First, I use data on multinational production. The data on multinational production, I call MIL, are the production of firm from one country producing in another country. For example, when I is the US and L is China, it records the production of US firms in China. This variable is a summation of allocation over the final destination. We don't know what X is, but we know how X should sum up over destinations. Then I use data on trade. The data on trade, I call TLM, are the movement of goods from one country to another. For example, when L is China and M is the US, I record the trade flow from China to the US. This variable is a summation of allocation over the origin of the firm. We don't know what X is, but we know how X should sum up over the origin. Using these accounting identities, we still don't know what exactly the allocation X should be, but we can construct a set of allocation that satisfies the identity, hence consistent with the data. Second, I develop a model of multinationals trade that encompasses various special cases. This model translates the allocation to the counterfactual outcomes. The special cases are 3 theories of foreign direct investment, and I just say this as FDI, which is a kind of different term to call multinationals. So pure horizontal FDI, where affiliates only selling to the host country. Pure vertical FDI, where affiliates only selling to the headquarters country. And pure export platform FDI, where affiliates only selling to third countries. Finally, by combining this model and the triangulation, I can characterize and derive a set of outcomes from counterfactual experiments. Again, we have this counterfactual scenario we want to evaluate, and this framework does not tell you what exactly would happen, but tells you the set of possible outcomes consistent with the data available. This is what I did to construct a framework. Now I move on to takeaways. There are 3 takeaways. First, Triangulation and the model characterize an interval of outcomes for counterfactual experiments. Let me take an example of welfare effect of some policy. The statement means that deriving the best welfare outcome and the worst welfare outcome from the counterfactual policy is sufficient to derive the set. The best, the worst, and anything in between completely characterize the possible welfare outcome. Second, pure horizontal FDI and pure vertical FDI bound gains from openness from trade and multinationals. This counterfactual outcome, gains from openness, is a welfare gain from having multinationals and trade. The statement is, we have this interval of gains from openness consistent with the data. Once we assume pure horizontal FDI, affiliates are only selling to the host country, we will derive maximum gains from openness for any country. If we assume pure vertical FDI, affiliates are only selling to the headquarters country, we will derive minimum gains from openness for any country. This shows that studies assuming horizontal FDI and vertical FDI may be assuming something very specific in terms of gains from openness. Now let's move on to more quantitative result. The bottom line is, there are a wide range of counterfactual outcomes consistent with the data, but the interval is still useful for policy evaluation. I showed two counterfactual experiments from the paper. When I derive the interval of gains from openness for Germany, welfare gains from having access to multinationals and trade, well, that is exactly gains from openness, can be small as 4.5% in terms of welfare or large as 14.5%. This is an economically sizable range. Next, I'm inspired by Joe Biden's proposal. I perform a policy counterfactual that penalizes US multinationals offshoring. When I focus on the US, there's a clear judgment on this policy. The interval indicates there is no chance that the US welfare to increase from this policy. Thank you for listening to my presentation. I hope to see you soon.